Okay, so there we go. Okay, so you will, evening everybody. You'll excuse the lack of food. Okay, so what I wanted to look at is go through some aspects of the Seder, perhaps with some and speaking in a different way. Since October the 7th, since we in a different world, I think, since October the 7th. And the two things that's coming up about the world that we moved into is we have these four children, these four sons, right? That we speak about. Qasim is the wise son. The Rasha is the wicked son. Now remember, the Rasha is not the opposite of the Chacham at all. Chacham is a Chacham, he's clever. The Rasha is somebody who's disengaged. He's moved himself away. He's a person that doesn't want to be part of things. The Tzam is the person is the way we translate it simple. And when we say simple, we mean like dof. Right? When you think about how you always express the simple son, the Tzam, we always like a bit of a dof one around. He doesn't really know what's going on. Right? But that's not what it means. Because the word Tzam really means naive. It's more than foolish or simple. It's a person that he's not saying just doesn't need all the complicated answers to things and things like that. He just wants to know what's going on. So if that's the case, we need to try and understand him a little bit more. And then you've got this one, which I think I find is the saddest of all of them, the one who does not know how to ask. Why it's so sad is because how can you have a child who doesn't know how to ask? I mean, that's like bizarre. How do you have children ask all the time? These little children, why, but why? And then something happens over the course of their engagement with life that they stop asking. So they don't know how to ask things anymore. So let's try and understand a few things, perhaps. But in order to get there, first thing we have to look at really is the 15 steps. We have to understand that there are 15 steps. We've got a lot of numbers in our Seder. When we speak about numbers, most of the time we speak about the number 4. 4 sons, 4 cups of wine, 4 questions, all these things, right? But if you really look carefully, firstly, there are not 4 questions, and that's important. There's one question. A question in Hebrew has a question preface to it, a question word, right? So you've got lama, ma, matai, all these different Hebrew words that are used as question words. In what we call the Manishtanah, if we translate that as the 4 questions, there's only one question, and that's ma. Okay, so the number 4, let's lose one of those 4s. We've got the 4 sons, fine, we'll keep it. We've got the 4 cups of wine, great. What are those 4 cups of wine really related to? They're related to the 4 languages of Geula, of redemption. Or say to me, I can't forget all this. That I'm not going to. But there is a 5th. And so the 4 is actually 5, the cups of wine. So if that's the case, we've now moved 2 of our 4s. Okay? And we've actually got one integrous 4 left. And that's the 4 that is the 4 sons. They're not the 4s, really. Okay? And the reason why that is because the reason why it is because the four children actually are the fundamentals behind what the Seder has to be. What's the Seder? We call it a Seder, but it's actually a fulfillment of a mitzvah. What's the mitzvah? The mitzvah that the Torah says, V'higada Levincha. We're going to get there now. That V'higada Levincha means you must tell your child. You've got to teach your child. You've got to relate it. You've got to make it into something that is exciting, interesting for them. How do we do that? Through this process of 15 steps. And the 15 actually is the real number. It's the most important number of the Seder. Why? Because the whole Seder is made up of 15 steps. That's number 1. And the central song of the Seder, if I ask that, what's the most, the song of Manistan, what's the most well-known song of the Seder? That's part of the Seder. Chagag has an Adam. That's why if you're a Chabadnik, it's not we don't sing Chagag. They don't sing. What's the actual Seder itself? Which? So that's the 15, right? But what's the other? What's the song that you all know? There you go, Dayan. Okay, Dayan. If it would have been enough. right? Fascinating word, Dayenu. But how many Dayenis are there? 15. And what does it say? Kama ma'alot gedolot hamakom alein. How many great things that Hashem did for us? And it mentions these 15 things. So really, the Seder is about getting to a point through these 15 steps to a recognition of the 15, which is the great things that Hashem did for us. It could have been 16, it could have been 20, but they only give us 15. Why? Because the number 15 is fundamental. The number 15 for us is number one, is the number of steps that went from the Ezrat Nashon, from the women's area to the Ezrat Yisrael, to the top of the where they had where everything was placed for the Beit HaMikdash, and there were 15 steps that went up. Okay, and that's important because that on Sukkot, on the Sukkot special water libation celebration, what would happen is that the Kohanim would stand on each step, and each step there would be a song of one of the Shir HaMalos. You know, we've got beginning every time Shabbos Shir HaMalos and on Yom Tov. Those there are 15 of those, and each one of the Shir HaMalos they can start to 15 steps on that step. That is very difficult, going up and up and up and up. So we think it starts at just a simple space called Kiddush, and we end at a simple space called Nirtza, which is the end. But that's not what it means. Kiddush, Kiddush, we don't call Kiddush. We say Kadesh. Why don't we just say Kiddush? What is Kadesh? Kadesh is the verb. Kiddush is the noun. Kadesh means sanctify yourself. So we start with this whole thing and understanding that this whole process is going to be the whole process is going to be a process of kedusha, of sanctification, that's going to end with what's called nirtza. Nirtza is not conclusion. We say it in our Shmona Esrei every day. That process is the completion of what we're trying to keep doing. Okay? Go through it. So you'll see that there's one thing that keeps standing out. Because the main part of the Seder is the man is the God. And what we often do is we make it so caught up, okay, in who the four sons are, and the four questions, the one question, 10 questions, whatever it is, we get caught up in all the stuff before, and we don't actually tell the story properly. Now, what I want to show you is why it's so important to tell the story properly. So let's go. Why do we have the Magid? Again, I'm sorry you can't see it. But we have the Magid because it says we have this obligation to tell our children about the fact that there was this thing called Yetziat Mitzrayim, the coming out of Mitzrayim. And everyone's got a different way of doing it, and everyone's got their own family minhagim, and I'm not going into that. But the whole Haggadah is structured around the ability to tell the story. But the ability to tell the story has to be a story that is told to who? To your children. Which children? The 4 children. So we have to find within the Seder things that resonate with all 4 children. The Chacham, the Rasha, the Shani, the Tam, and the Shani, the Shor. We have to find that. Because sitting around our table is one of those people, for sure. And therefore our Seder has to be in a manner in which allows us to at least give them something as well. If we're going for the lowest common denominator, then you're missing out the Chacham. If you're going for the Chacham only, then you're missing out everybody else. And so therefore the Seder structure gives us an ability to connect with everybody. So let's just move a little bit out of this. Okay. So let's say the 4 sons. These 4 children, okay? The 4 children, the whole concept of the 4 sons originates from 4 different places in the Torah itself, right? Where there are 4 different questioning spaces that are mentioned in the Torah, and the reason is because each one represents a different approach. Okay, so you really can't see this, and this is really upsetting. But the Torah gives an answer to each one of those questions, different answer. But the Haggadah gives a different answer from the Torah. Okay, now that's important. Why it's important? Because the purpose of the Torah is not the same purpose as the Haggadah. The purpose of the Torah is to give what you need to know. The purpose of the Haggadah is to inspire, to teach, to engage, to bring back, to do something that's a little bit different. Not the same purpose as the Torah. And so therefore, for example, when the wise son asks, the Chacham asks, what are all these things? All these different things. Then what do you say to him? You say to him, don't forget that you have to be eat after coming by. Right? But that's not an answer. It's just a shortened form of the real answer. And the real answer is that those words come from the last Mishnah of the tractate of Pesach. And so really what the Chacham is asking is tell me everything. And so you tell him everything up to the last Mishnah of the tractate of Pesach. But there's not only Chacham at your table. Okay. I mean maybe there are. I don't think they're very tall. Okay. There's also the Rashi. The Rashi says, what's this to me? Ma avadazot lachem. What is this whole thing? What are you doing? What are you guys doing? He's sitting at the table. He's sitting at the table. Okay? And what is he saying? The way we translate that is that you blunt his teeth. But what is he taking away the box? You would not have been redeemed. So I was thinking to myself that maybe this is part of the post-October Descendant experience. What October Descendant to many people is awakened a certain level of attention. So some of them are Russia, not in the terms of that they are Rishayim, that they're evil, wicked people, but in the terms of that they haven't yet been able to pull themselves back into Am Yisrael. And what do we say to them? It's like a post October the 7th and a post Trump's victory world is a fascinating world where we live in. And whether you agree with Trump or you don't agree with Trump, there's something fascinating about it. And that is that the woke world no longer has its power. Which means you don't have to hold on, stop speaking like that. Now you have to blunt the impact of the statement, and you say to him straight, if you had been there, you wouldn't have been redeemed. You have extracted yourself from the Jewish people. So now the choice, how do we get him back? That's what we have to look at. How do we get him back into the fold? And it's the only way that is most of them. What do you have to do? The Messiah says, At Patach Lo. The Russia is intelligent enough. The Russia is intelligent enough to ask a question. But the one who is just like, like you see on all these videos where the people are really silly, dumb. Okay? You have to open up. You have to start explaining to him what's really happening. Now, if we take that as parents, right, so it becomes a much more difficult situation. We all have children who want to know everything. We all have children who like to, especially when they're teenagers, like to remove themselves from things. We all have children who just like, oh, whatever, I'm happy to know, right, especially teenagers. And we also have those children who just like, we have to be the ones that open it up for them. Because either for whatever reason, they're not opening it up for themselves. And that's the challenge of this whole Magid that we're going to go through. Okay. So, in some ways, for the wicked son, a strong rebuke and highlights his exclusion. For the simple son, keeps the Torah's direct response. The reason it happened is because we came out of Egypt. For the one who does not ask, emphasizes our need to proactively educate the child. Now, Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch gives some. He says that all of And then you can bring back many of its quite amazing. No one's really an atheist. Very few real. Then the simple or naive son, he's just got an emotional connection, but with no depth, and that's okay. Well, that's okay. And the one who doesn't know how to ask is a passive person, a passenger in the journey of life, and we as parents have to make sure that we lead them. Okay, the yeah, Rosh Soloveitchik says similar. Okay, but his his real challenge is that Hebrews, and that's what we want to try and look at, is how do we engage? How do we actually do that? And that's what we have to look at. So, if we look at the structure of the Maggid, so we'll see we've got these four sons. Now, I'm sorry, I'm going through it through here, and I'm sorry you can't see it, but we've got these four sons. The first one is the Chacham. But the Chacham, he wants to know about the halachas. He wants to know about what is that Hashem wants from him. So it's an easy one. It really is an easy one. And the general Maggid gives him the story, but where does the Maggid really start? So where does the Seder really start? What is the part of the Seder that you go through the quickest? Be honest. How many plagues there were and that, yes? Right. Okay. So we run through that part. Right? That's the part that is tells about all the incredible miracles that happen. Is that the appropriate part to run through? We spend time about these guys sitting in Bnei Brak, and we don't spend time about standing the praises of Hashem. Right? The Maggid's real thing about the Maggid is those verses that we learn out, which is the thing which is the part of the Seder that is taken from the Torah, and it's the part of the Seder that is the declaration that you say when you bring your Bikurim. Arami Ovei David. You tell the story. There was an Aramean who wanted to destroy my father, except they went down to Mitzrayim, they became huge, and then there was all trouble, and then they made them into slaves, and eventually Hashem came and took them out. That's the main part of the Seder. That's the one part of the Seder, together with all the numbers, that we rush to and get to finish them. But that's the key. But it's only the key for the Chacham, because he wants to know. Right? But if we don't have Chachamim around our table, so maybe we can rush through it. But if we want to know stuff, we want to learn stuff, we've got to be part of that way in a proper structured way. Then you have the wicked son. Okay? For the wicked son, we say something that is powerful. And I think this year, as it was last year, most of us did not experience in a real way the Holocaust. We may have had family, we have not known about it, but we had our own little mini Holocaust. On the 7th of October was a mini Holocaust. And the 7th of October, we learned this concept. What does V'hisha Amda mean? We say that Hashem is the one who stood for us through all generations when someone came against us. Right? Every generation they try and destroy us. Now, we've always thought that, we always had this idea that they want to, but look at us now, look where we are now. We've got real people that want to absolutely decimate from the river to the sea. I'm talking about to understand what the river and the sea is. Right? Iran is just a rebirth of Hamas, as is Hamas, as are the Houthis, as is Qatar even would fall into the similar category, and the rest of the world as well. So all of a sudden we're living in a world where we can say to this Russia, you're either part of us or you're not part of us. And if you're not part of us, but no, if you're not part of us, you're not going on our journey, and you actually you will not be saved in any way. Because they don't care. They don't care whether you're part of the Russia, you're not part of the Russia, you're part of the journey, you're not part of the journey. So we speak about V'hisha Amda, and then we speak about the concept that every mensch in the world feels, and that is gratitude. And so Dayenu, says Rav Rimon, is part of the expression that we have to bring the Russia in. If he can feel a sense of gratitude, then he'll feel a sense of being with the rest of Am Yisrael. Then the simple son, we just say Avadim Hayinu. We just tell him what it was. Not about. What about the one She'eni Yodeh Lishol? The She'eni Yodeh Lishol. There's a mitzvah in the Haggadah that says, "B'chol dor v'dor chayav adam lirot et atzmo ki'ilu yatzam miMitzrayim." Every generation, person has to see themselves as if they came out of Mitzrayim. Right? You all read that? You've done it 100 times. Okay. What does it mean? How do you see yourself? Now I'm asking the question. I'm not even answer. How do you see yourself if you came out of it? Because that's the chiyuv. It's a chiyuv. It's an obligation to see as if you yourself has come out of Mitzrayim. So how do you see that? You have to see yourself as if you came out of Mitzrayim. What does that mean? I don't know. The truth is, I don't know the answer. I've been back through this for years. What does it mean that we see ourselves when we came out of Mitzrayim? So people say, our personal sorrows and other, but that's what it means. That means if we came out of Mitzrayim. In every generation, which means if we had lived 100 years ago, we would still have had to do the same thing. Or maybe we did. So how does that help our She'ena Yodeh Lishol? Can you see? That's the question. That's the question that you have to ask. How do you see part of this experience of the Exodus? I don't know the answer, but that's the question you've got to ask yourself. Sitting at the night of the Seder, we sing all the songs, but we don't ask ourselves the question. And that's the biggest question, I think, of the whole lot. Right? We have to, and maybe it's something around the Seder to say, okay, how do you do it? You know, if you've got 50 people around the Seder, it might not work. But for 2 or 3 people to give their feeling, but it demands thought. It demands, how do I do it? Because that is, if asking myself, like then this becomes a personal experience for me. The whole Seder is an experiential thing. That's why we eat the maror, and it's why we eat the matzah, and it's why we have the charos, and why we have all to make those experiences as to give me like a trigger so that I can feel as if I was in Mitzrayim. In my house in Glen Hazel, where I've got everything in the world, right? And I'm sitting there with 700 rand shmura matzah, which is ridiculous in and of itself, right? And I'm thinking, oh, I came out of Mitzrayim because I just tasted a little bit of maror. Hard, but a question and something to think about. If you live, you had Nova and you escaped, you're not Mitzrayim. But we weren't. Thank God. So what is Mitzrayim for us? What does it mean? How can we really connect to it? So Chazal explain on a simple level, I don't know much more to say. Chazal explained that every hardship we go through in this world, everything is sourced back into the shibud of the enslavement in Mitzrayim. Everything. So maybe we've got to find that way. And it's not because I came out of that hardship. It's how do I source that back and back and back and back all the way through. The issues I have with my children, the issues I have with money, the issues I have with home, the issues I have with whatever, with the gate, all these things. Somewhere along the line, we can find that somewhere in Mitzrayim. And we've got to find, and maybe that's why we're given these difficulties, to find a way to tap into the Mitzrayim. Okay. So I want to look at this Arami Ovei David. The Chacham, why it's such an important part, that I said, is that last part of the Arami Ovei David. Right? Why it's so important is because it has the fundamentals of Jewish education. And the reality is, if we do that properly, we actually cover everything for everybody. And we can actually fulfill whatever we need to do for everybody if we do it properly. So number one, it's a text-based learning. Okay? How often do we do text-based learning? Real text-based learning. I know you do every day, right? But how often do we do text-based? Not a shiur. Sit down with the text and analyze the text. Because the reality is we're all chachamim. We've all got brains. We're successful in certain things, be it in professionally or just in thought or in writing things. We're all successful. But how often do we take these texts and really work with them? The same thing is there in the Midrash. the concept of midrash is important because what midrash does is it gives us the story around the story. Because the story is complete in the Torah. The Torah is not a history book, right? So we have to understand what was going on, and the midrashim come and they expand on those stories. Why that's so important is because in order to get to that point, we've got to understand the story, at least the baseline story. And so all of a sudden, the Seder becomes a night of telling stories. Each aspect, there are 5 different sections. 4, yeah, okay, well, four or 5 different sections in this Arami of David, depending how you count them, and each one is a story, and that story has to be told. And you can tell the story on any level you want. You can tell a story on the highest level, most deepest intellectual level, or you can tell a story as Patach Law. You invite people, you open for them, you invite them into the conversation on that story. Okay, got it. And then there's the historical and halachic perspective. Not everybody likes history, okay? But we have to know history. Part of our very essence is to know history, and part of our very essence is to understand that there's certain things that Kodesh Baruch Hu expects from us. That's called halakha. Okay, so let's go. The text-based one is, we said that he asks about this, whole thing is analytical. The midrashic explanation is that we take each one of these psukim and break it down. Break it down clearly as much as we possibly can. And finally, the historical and halakhic perspective, it connects all the events over the, and that's why it's a fascinating insight, right? As to why, how do you connect the splitting of the sea and what happened in Egypt? There were more plagues there. There were 100, 200, 250, and 100. What okay? Why is that so important? But it has to be important because there's 2 pages of the Haggadah with few illustrations underneath, right? So it's a big part of the Haggadah. So we have to understand that. Where does it come in? And that's what I'm saying is I think that part of our experience in a post-October the 7th world is to be able to explain things to people that we've always left out. Because it's in those explanations that we can reattach people to where they belong. And even our own family. I think about it often. Like we scared to say things as are we scared to tell our children about what's really happening, so we don't tell them everything, right? But if you go through the midrash that happened in Mitzrayim, that they're just horrific. The midrashim tell how the Egyptians dealt with the Jewish babies, right? They throw them against the wall. That's the one midrash says that they took the babies and made them fill it wherever the bricks were too big to put in. So there's big stuff. Now, do we tell our children that, or don't we tell our children that? That's a question. And at what age, and when, at what stage? But all of things become part of what we have to tell because we've been through an experience that we need to know about, that we need to understand, that we need to now reflect on how that impacts on the way we see the world as Jews. Because at the end of the day, it says the Sfonim Areva. You know what this night is about? One word: emunah, belief. If you don't believe, this whole night is a non-starter. But if you do believe, imagine if you tell the stories in the right way. And that means we have to learn about it before. If we tell them in the right way, we learn about it before, then our belief becomes enhanced. I don't know what you feel. I always feel like like I'm in a different place. You know, you walk outside and it's like, oh, okay, fresh air, like strange. It's a strange feeling. But it should be a strange feeling because you spent more time, 4 or 5 hours sitting, learning, discussing, engaging, right? Which we don't do. What an opportunity we have to engage in that way. So, what I let me just thank you. You're on video. You're on video. But the whole idea of this whole thing is quite intense. What the whole idea is of what I'm wanting to do over the next 2 weeks as well is to try and find how we can make our Seder's most relevant in the world in which we live. But Rabbi Norman Lamb said something fascinating. He said, we are obsessed with relevance. But sometimes it's in the irrelevant that the real relevance sits. Because if we are only looking about what's good for now, right, then tomorrow now is different. And yesterday now is different, and in 3 weeks' time now is going to be different. So we have to have certain fundamentals. Those certain fundamentals are the structure of the Seder. And it's our job now to put into that structure of the Seder what is relevant, what is important, and what is timeless for now. And then we can make sure that our children find that which we're doing, the world in which we live, something that they're able to engage with, whether they're the Chacham, the Tam, the Rasha, or the Daily Show. So let's stop there tonight, and please God, we still have a bit more time. The time. Oh, sorry, okay. 10 more minutes. Good to go? We're good to go for a few more minutes? Okay. So what I wanted to do with you is understand. I just want to understand Manishtana a little bit. Just trying to understand what's the purpose of Manishtana? Because we all sing it, right? So if you look in Halacha, the Halacha says the following. The Halacha says that you pour the second cup. So you make the first, you make Kiddush, that's the first thing. Then you go and you wash your hands. Right? You don't make the bracha. Right? And then we have a 10-minute discussion about why you can't make the bracha. Don't do that. It's not important. It's really not that important. Right? Then we have karpas. Understand a little bit about karpas. Karpas is a fascinating thing because karpas, why do we have karpas? Right? So we all give different things. It's this little sprig of greens. The reason we have it, the Gemara says, is why? In order that the children will ask questions. So we ascribe a whole lot of other meanings to it. But one of the important meanings that we have of karpas is this concept of dipping. Right? We dip. When do we dip? We don't dip. Okay. None of us, we're not Sfardim. Sfardim dip. They do a lot of dipping. We are not big dippers, Ashkenazim. Right? So dipping must mean something different for us from what it does perhaps to them. So let's look into the Torah where the dippings happen. So the one, of course, is the dipping of the coat of Yosef into the blood. Right? So what did that do? It's a fascinating thing. That deceived his father to think that the child was dead. Can you imagine? 30 years he lived without his son. Can you imagine? Not one of the children told his father for 30 years that the son would still be alive. Can you imagine? Which child is that? The Tam, the Rasha, the Chacham, or the Daily Show? Interesting, huh? What would have happened if they had told? Well, maybe. We don't know. Would have been different. So why is that story so important for us to start our Seder with? Because we break that, and then what do? We say, this is the bread of affliction that our forefathers ate in Mitzrayim. Anyone who's hungry, come and eat. Not got to do with anything. You can't ask people to come and eat when you're sitting around, especially here. You locked every door all the way up to your Seder because and when you open the door for Eliyahu, you open the security gate. Like that's not opening the door. So what are we doing? So they explain the reason is because we're creating brotherhood. We're saying, yes, they dip blood, but our emphasis is not the dipping of blood. Our emphasis is the creation of brotherhood. Those who are hungry, let them give you part of it. Okay? So we do all these things, and then what do? Then we fill the second cup of wine. And then it says, the Mishnah says, not me, it's the Mishnah says, Bakan haben shoel. Once we have filled the second cup, the child asks, okay, and then the Mishnah says, and if there is no child, then the wife asks, okay, and if there is no wife, then he asks himself, okay, and if no one knows how to ask, what do? You say, Manishtana alayha. So in halacha, if you would be sitting around your table and one of your kids says to you, how come tonight we are eating matzah? You don't have to say manishtana. Because the whole point was to create a question, right? So the manishtana itself, that's why we have the youngest do it. Interesting is the youngest is generally the one who does know how to ask questions, okay? That's why we have the youngest do it, because the youngest is like the sha'ina yodei shor. And so therefore, what do? They say the manishtana. And the manishtana is an amazing opportunity for us to help those who don't like to answer, maybe a little bit introverted to ask, maybe a little bit introverted, they maybe feel a little bit inadequate. Just ask a question. And the minute you ask a question and you understand the question that you're asking, the Gemara says that what? That a good question is half the answer. Then you can start exploring the answer, not with everybody else, but with that person. That's what Jews do, right? You ask a question and you ask a question back. That's how the Gemara works, right? Gemara will say something, someone asks a question, say, yeah, but what about this? Yeah, but what about that? What about that? Give the answer, at least give one answer. Because that's not how we work. We work by asking questions to make the answer, to make the question deeper, the question bigger, and therefore the answer much deeper as well. Okay, so that's one important idea in the Manishtana. The other thing is that one of the ways of getting the Sha'ani or Daily Shol involved, it's quite fascinating that we've got all these songs that are pretty well plastered through the Haggadah, right? And then we have the songs at the end of like Chad Gadya and all these things. Why do we have Chad Gadya and Echad Mi Yodeh? What are those things? I mean, they're cute songs, right? And that's the best part of the Seder, let's be honest, right? Because that keeps them going. But look at what Chad Gadya is. Have you ever thought about the words? Right? Chad Gadya, there's one Gedi goat that my father bought for 2 zuzim, that my father bought for these 2 coins, right? What's it going to do with anything at the Seder? Anything. Where's the Chad Gadya? And what's the 2 zuzim? And who's the father? And then what happens to the Chad Gadya gets? Eaten by the kelev, or by the cat. And then the cat gets eaten by the kelev. And then the kelev gets eaten by the stick. And the stick gets burnt by the fire. And the fire gets extinguished by the water. And the water gets dunked by the ox. Right? But what's that got to do with the Seder? We'll discuss it. Don't worry, we'll get to it. But that's what we've got to start. And then we have amazing thing. We have Echad Mi Yodeh. Right? Who knows one? What's that? It's a question. I'm asking the question. Give me an answer. And fascinating, the number 4 is not the number 4 of the Seders. 4 is the mothers. The 3 are the fathers. And 2 are the Luchot that Moshe brought. Right? So it's clearly not directly connected to the Seder. It's connected to something much bigger. So please God, over the next couple of weeks, we'll discuss those things as well. Okay, let's stop there.